Hello. Now, welcome to my second presentation on chapter 12, and that is compound interest and present value. In my previous presentation, I gave out a conceptual view of compound interest and the future value. In this presentation, I want to focus on the present value. Now, remember what I said before. There are several tools that we can use to determine the future value or the present value. For example, we can use the financial calculator, we can use the financial tables, we can use spreadsheet, and we can use the financial formula. Now, since the focus of the text is on how to find these values by using the fi uh, financial tables, here is an example or a partial view of a present value table for a single amount. Again, just this is similar to what we did in a previous presentation on a future value. The difference is that this is a different table. This is a present value table. So if I can use the same example from a previous chapter uh, or from a previous presentation on the future value, where you're investing, let's say, uh, an investment of $100, and you invest in this for 2 years, and your your rate you've been given or the return on the investment is 10%. If that's the case, then we know that from our previous conversation is that the future value will be the present value uh, times, of course, the, 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 the future value interest factor, which in this example I said the future value interest factor is the 1 plus I raised to n, and that's basically the factor that you're finding out from the table. In a previous example, if you recall, then you invest in $100 and the present value interest factor is 1.2100, and that gave us as a future value of $121, which again you can just see in the previous conversation we were able to locate the 10% and the periods, and we were able to find the present value or the future value interest factor. Sorry. Now, in the present value table, if we need to determine the initial value of the investment or the value of the investment today, then in that case, it's like you have been given a future value. So if I use the same example, so you have at period 0 today, and then you have at end of year 1 and the end of year 2. So in a previous conversation, you are given an initial investment of $100 and you have to find the future value. In this example of trying to determine the present value, you're going to be given the future value, which in our example, we can just use the 121. So you have an investment that's going to pay you $121, 2 years from today, and that investment is the return is 10%. Then that case is going to give you $121 today. So the question is how much or what's the value of this investment today in today's dollars? So in other words, today, how much is this 121 value or equal to in today's dollars? To do so, then we know that again, what we're looking for is we're looking for a present value interest factor from the table that we can use to multiply this with our future value, and that will give us the present value. Again, if you think from a formula perspective, what we are saying, if we know that the future value is equals to 100 times the 1 plus I raised to n, then of course we know that to determine, and this is basically the present value, then we know that the present value will be equal to the future value times the inverse of that the present value interest factor. So in other words, what you're looking at is this, that the present value will be equal to the future value times the inverse. But this is the same thing we're saying, the future value divided by 1 plus I raised to n. So when the table is given you, again, is that the inverse. So the table is giving you this. This is what the present value table is giving you. And then you take out that the future value interest factor. You take out that factor and then you multiply that with the future value which is given to you, and that will give you, of course, the present value of that investment. So if I use the same example, if 121, so to use the table, then of course we know that this is an investment on a yearly basis, on an annual basis, and is for 10%. So our 10% is here, and the number of periods is 2 years. So you'll pick 2 years and 10%, and you walk through it, and you find you have an interest factor of 0.8264, and therefore your present value will be equal to 0.8264, which is the present value interest factor times your future value, which is 121, as you saw in our previous example. So if you do this math, what you'll end up getting 0.8264 times 121, and this will give you $99.9944. Again, you can see this is basically $100, but again, as I told you before, is if you try to use the financial calculator or use the tables, you're going to get an approximate value, which is close. So in this example, this is basically $100 as your present value if you end up using the tables to find the, the present value. Now, keeping in mind, again, the number of periods and the rates are very important, and they will change our computations. So assuming, for example, our rate here was 10%, but it's on a semi-annual basis, then we know that the rate is not 10, the rate per period is not 10%. We talk about 2 periods per year, so our rate per period is going to be 5%. So it's 10 divided by 2 will be 5%. And this was a case of 2 years and is on a semi-annual basis. Then, of course, the total number of periods is not 2 years. It's going to be 2 times 2 periods per year, so it's going to be 4. So in that case, then of course you're going to take 4 and you take 5%, and again you do the walkthrough and you find the present value interest factor to be 0.8227, and you'll take that factor, multiply it with the future value, which is 121 if that was the case, and that will give you the present value for that particular investment or that particular loan. So keep in mind the number of periods are very important. Determine that one first and determine the rate per period before you can even think about using the table to determine the present value factor. So what's the difference then between the present value and the future value? So if you think about the present value and the future value. So we use the same example of $80 being invested for 4 years at 8%. We know that the future value of this, as we saw before, is 108.84. And the present value, again, will be, then of course you'll take the 0.7350, which is basically the four periods and 8%. If you work from the table, that will be the present value interest factor times, of course, the future value, which is 108, and that will give you 80. So you could see it's basically the inverse of the other. So to determine the future value, we need to know the present value, and we need to know the number of periods, and we need to know the rate per period. To determine the present value, we need to know the future value, and then of course the rate per period, and of course the number of periods. So that's very important in trying to determine the future value. So if you draw this again, what we are saying is that if you invest $80 today, that's the present value. If you think it is, so this amount will grow to 108.84, and this basically at 4 periods and at 8%. So this amount will grow to 108.84. And if somebody gave you 108.84, asking to determine the present value, then of course you use a different table to basically move this amount from 108 to $80. So in this case here, you're using the future value table, and here you're using the present value table. That's basically the difference between this and this. So basically the inverse of the other. So I hope this information is helpful, and you can deduce the difference between the two values and how to move from one value to the other. And no, the challenging part students will always have is to try to determine that using the right table. Remember, the tables are labeled. So, for example, this table is a present value table. So you only use this table if you're trying to determine the present value, the amount today, the today's in dollars, and use the future value table if the question was asking you to determine the future value, where you've been given the amount today and how much that amount will compound to or will grow to in the future. So you'll end up using that particular table. So I hope this information helps, and let me know if you have any questions or any concerns. Feel free to send me an email, and I'll be looking forward for the last part of my presentation on chapter 12, which will cover mostly a number of problems where we're going to apply the present value and the future value and the compound interest concept to some practical problems. So see you soon. Thank you. Bye bye.